This episode is made possible by our generous patrons. To learn more, visit patreon.com/ink2film.
Welcome to the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book.
And then see the movie.
I'm James.
And I'm Luke.
And this week, we cover the first 4 episodes of HBO's limited series, Sharp Objects. I don't know about you, but I'm so excited that this book got adapted, and I'm so excited that this series exists.
I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's great. I've been blown away by what I've seen so far. We're 4 episodes in, we should say. Haven't watched episode 5 yet, even though it's out, because we're going to save that just from the way that we're dividing this up.
So the way that we're going to cover this project here is we've already read the first 8 chapters. The first half of the book we've read and covered. That episode's out. And then this episode covers the first 4 episodes. Next episode is going to be most of the rest of the book, other than the last 2 chapters.
Yeah.
And then we're going to cover the next 3 episodes of the show.
Leading up to the finale, but not the finale.
Leading up to the finale. And then we're going to do the finale and the last 2 chapters of the book all in one episode.
All in one episode. Which I wanted to talk to you about. We need to decide, and maybe we could each do something different. I don't know. I just wanted to get your take on record. How do you want to do that final one? Do we want to read the book before we watch the finale? Like finish the book before the finale? Or do we want to watch the finale and then go back and read the last 2 chapters?
You know, what could be interesting is if you read the finale and I watch the finale first, and then just say like what our reaction is.
And kind of compare.
Because we're both going to watch both, but just which one do we do first?
Right. Yeah. I think that sounds good. Yeah, I could read and then watch, and then you can do the opposite, and we can kind of talk about maybe how that affected our viewing or whatever. That sounds good.
Sounds cool. So in this episode, we're going to start out with some general thoughts, kind of talk about the show, what we think of it, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the filmmaker and showrunner as well, and then we're going to get into full spoilers. So we'll let you know when the spoilers start, but it's basically as soon as our coverage of the episodes start.
Yeah.
Okay, so general thoughts. Tell me what you thought.
Camille Preaker has really solidified herself as just an amazing character in my mind. She's so interesting. She's so flawed and damaged. And seeing Amy Adams' portrayal really just elevates it to me. I mean, like, I like the character in the book too, but her portrayal is really fantastic. My wife told me a story. She read an article that said that to get her to look like she does in the show, she is like constantly eating a ton of high sodium foods to like make her seem a little bit puffier. And she, like the way they did her makeup, it's like having it all runny and like making her look pallid, and she was like staying out of the sun and stuff, so she has that kind of pale complexion, all to make her look like an alcoholic, right, who's just like sweating vodka out of her pores, and just like it's so convincing. She's really good in this role. Yeah,
and I mean so many of the characters in the show, like seeing them on screen are just like taking it to the next level for me, because these characters, like Adora, seeing Adora in the actual show makes her even more believable to me, because it felt like it was a character in a story, and then when I see it on screen, it feels so much more intense or real. And then also Emma's character is less kind of outwardly evil than I thought she was going to be. You know what I mean? Like there's more of something there that's like endearing, like a little girl would be.
All the characters feel slightly more nuanced so far in the show. Adora is a prime example of that, where I actually feel more sorry for her and more empathetic towards her than I did in the book, where I kind of was just viewed her as almost a villain.
Right.
But I don't know, like maybe as the book goes on, that would have changed. That's something that'll be interesting to see next week when we read more of it. And I do want to say, like, we don't always have this opinion. This is not just like, oh, we've read something and now we see the thing and it's like, oh, it's come to life and it's so much better. That's not always the case.
No.
But in this particular instance, I think both of us are really struck by the vision that this showrunner and director is really helping to bring to life. And I mean, this show's beautiful. I'm constantly amazed at the set design, the colors, the overall kind of sweaty feel of everything. They really capture that. And then I'm going to rave about the sound design a lot, but that is something that has repeatedly, every time I see an episode, jumps out at me how good the sound design is. In particular, the music and how it's given to us is, I don't know if you noticed this, you probably did, but every single time we get music in this show, it has a source in a scene. It's never just music. It's always coming from something, whether it's a car, stereo, whether it's an iPod, whether it's, Alan's stereo in the house or whatever it might be. There's always a source for the sound, and that's so cool to me.
I totally agree. In film, it's diegetic sound is something that has an actual source rather than it just being like some present thing that's like playing out through the movie to give the viewers. You can use it to ground it, right? You can use it to ground it and make it feel like it actually is in the real world. And I definitely wanted to talk to you about that because I started realizing this in the first or second episode. And then as we get further along, and it's like, what does music normally do? It's forcing, it's you can't control it, right? The music is going to make you feel a certain way. It's not something that you have any sort of say in. So it's the way that the filmmaker can be like, this is how you're going to feel now, or how the characters feel. As the story plays out, I don't want to spoil anything, but as the story plays out, we realize like there are reasons behind it. And I thought that was so powerful that this happens so much too, because there are so many things that we get flashes of, mundane items, things throughout the show that we just think, oh, like he's very artistic. We're seeing a lot of different shots of everyday things you would see in a small town. And it feels like to me, every single thing comes back around.
Yeah. I mean, there's two things that makes me want to mention. So first off with the sound, it's like the sound is also it's working on multiple levels, right? It's taking something and making it do more than one job, which in fiction writing or in film I think is a great thing to do. And so while you get this music that's setting tone, that's setting feeling, you're also usually it's linked to a character, whether that's Alan listening to his classical music or whether that's her iPhone or the iPod or whatever it is. Or it's the kid beating the drum in episode 4, I think. It tells us something about the character who is producing that music in some fashion, right? Like, so it's just cool how it's like so many things are clever in that way. And then what you were talking about with the little what they're showing us, this show, the way it handles memory, flashback, all that stuff is so brilliant. Like so she'll see something or hear something, and it will trigger a specific memory, which is then shown to us, which is then brought back, and it kind of blends with what's happening in the present. And then we literally see her being haunted by the memories of her past as well, and hallucinating them into reality. And the way that all blends together creates this really kind of dreamy feel that where you kind of aren't sure all the time what's real and what's not, which makes it's also very close to Camille's perspective in that sense too. Which is just really cool. I don't know. We talked about it in the book, how it's all Camille's perspective. So we kind of have that like we unreliable narrator possibly, and we're getting that in the show as well. Even though we do get more with like Richard, and we get more with Chief Vickery and some other characters where she's not present. But overall, the show still feels very grounded in her perspective.
Yeah, the fluidity of the present and the past and like the flashbacks and the way that a younger Camille will run out of the room and then present day Camille will like race after her and stuff. And then within the edit also, we're seeing a lot of like things that couldn't happen. And you were saying like it's still almost dreamlike, things that couldn't happen or demons that she's dealing with. That is honestly probably one of the major parts of the show that makes it feel so fresh and exciting and it's so much fun to watch.
And the words, right? The words that she carves into herself, we see them on things. And sometimes it's not clear whether or not it's real or it is a hallucination. She'll see a word written in dust on a car, or she'll see it scratched into the side of a car, whatever, And it's sometimes difficult to know, is that her hallucinating it or is that really there? I think often it's her hallucinating it, but I don't know for certain, right? Like occasionally maybe it is really there.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, let's. I'd love to know more about the director of this. I don't know anything about him.
Okay. His name is Jean-Marc Vallée, and he's a Canadian film director, producer, and film editor. His most notable works are Crazy, Dallas Buyers Club, Wild, Big Little Lies.
Okay, so I've heard of most of those, but I actually haven't seen any of them. So this is my first experience seeing anything he's done, it sounds like.
Well, Dallas Buyers Club is probably his most popular film. But what's so interesting about Jean-Marc Vallée is that he is his own editor, and he edits under a different name. He edits under a name called John McMurphy. So like in order to have autonomous control of his films, he like directs, sometimes he writes, and then he edits. So he's like fully involved.
It's interesting because that sounds to me like almost an auteur, like we talk about with different people like Quentin Tarantino and so forth, who control every part of it. But he's doing this adaptation, you know?
It's almost more than that, because like Tarantino doesn't edit his own stuff.
You don't think so?
So few, there's so few people who edit their own. Absolutely not.
Huh.
He doesn't edit. He's probably involved in the edit. He's probably in the edit room every day in and day out. But he's not physically editing. He's not listed as the editor on his own film.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. My point I was trying to make there is that it's interesting that he's doing an adaptation where the story, you know, and honestly a pretty faithful one. Really, they've added some things and they've maybe rearranged some stuff, but for the most part, it feels very faithful so far. We'll see how it progresses.
I think the first episode isn't missing any scenes. They may have added a few scenes here and there, but it's like the words ripped off the page and put on screen. Like there's nothing missing.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Big Little Lies and how popular that was. So you haven't seen this one either?
No, I haven't. It's been recommended to me, and it's something I should watch, but I have not seen it.
I came into Big Little Lies like fairly late. Caitlin was watching it, and I just happened to like walk in on the first episode, and I was like, "Wow, this is like very slice of life feeling, very like every day." And then it just like the end of the first episode, and then on, it was so different and so much fun to watch. In such an unexpected way, and then it just killed. It won like every Emmy, and it was like the best limited series to come out that year.
Oh, I didn't know it was a limited series. Interesting. So it's over. It's self-contained.
It's I think it's moving into the second. So I guess it's not a limited series, but it was a shorter series.
I see.
It's going to have a second season. For him, he moved from Big Little Lies into this project here, Sharp Objects, and there's a lot of similarities there, and I mean, the quality is definitely still there. It's very much like this is going to be nominated for a lot of things. We can call that right now because it feels like it's important. It's powerful. All the portrayals are really great. And then just like you said before, shot well, edited well. Everything looks great.
Now there's like a show creator as well, right? We should mention them.
Yeah, her name is Mari Noxon, and she is listed as the creator, and I believe she's the showrunner for the show. And she basically, I think it was her idea, and her basically she put the show together and then hired Jean-Marc Vallée to direct all of the episodes, probably after seeing Big Little Lies and seeing that it could be somewhat similar. She's known for things. I think she was a producer on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, cool.
She worked on Glee, I think, Mad Men, Grey's Anatomy. She's a producer, so she's worked on tons of stuff, and she's very prolific. So for her to like kind of champion this show and then hire someone as unique as Jean-Marc Vallée is just incredible.
Man, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's I mean, you mentioned it, so I get a chance to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with that show. I've seen every episode.
Oh yeah,
it holds a really special place in my heart. How about you?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was my growing up on the WB. Yeah, of course. Okay, cool. That was such a fun show too, and like that was our first introduction to like Joss Whedon, and obviously what's her name? Sarah
Michelle Gellar.
Sarah Michelle Gellar is so great, and I still love her because of Buffy. Anything she's in, I'll basically see.
So this show, from what I've been seeing, has been drawing a lot of comparisons to True Detective season 1, and I think those observations are apt in a certain way. I guess if you go in expecting the same level of almost like existential dread and discussion of what it means to be alive, like, no, you don't necessarily get that. But so I don't think that's what people mean. I think instead they mean it's dark, it's gritty, it's in the South, it's a murder mystery, right? It's a lot of terrible people doing terrible things, and doesn't pull any punches. Like, it's very shocking. And then I think the other thing is that it has a unified creative vision because of the director being there for every episode. And that was the same thing in True Detective, where it was Cary Fukunaga directed every single episode. So I think you kind of get that, when you get that really solid creative vision that you don't typically get in shows, You don't always get in shows. It creates a really interesting piece of art that I can see why people are making that comparison.
I agree. And I mean, it's so much fun to watch a show like this because it really is. When you have all those pieces in place, it's just an 8-hour movie. It's a director coming in and being able to make this like long form cinematic TV show. And you get such high quality shows. I feel like you said that there isn't quite as much, or you said, I don't know if you said there wasn't any, but I feel like there is a little bit of that, like, it's not quite like as sprawling as the existential dread that you were talking about. Like, I don't feel like it's as like your life in the universe, like what does life mean, like all of that stuff. But I feel like there is some of that there where it's people dealing with life and death and what it means to still be living with all the demons. And
No. I completely agree with that. I think it's there in a different way. It's there in the context, or it's there in the material itself. It makes you think about that, right? Like it makes you think about the pain everybody walks around with and how nobody ever truly heals, right? And how damaged people don't always come around like you often see in TV and like, you know what I mean? Just the consequences of all this stuff.
So you're saying that it's just not spoken about, like the characters are...
You don't have a Matthew McConaughey sitting down and literally laying out the philosophies, right? And which I love those scenes. Those are my absolute favorite scenes. I'm not trying to like say that that's bad, but I think a lot of people think of that particular style when they hear True Detective. Mm-hmm. And that isn't what makes this like True Detective. This is like True Detective in like all the other ways.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that.
And also an incredible lead. I think that's something you do think of how great a lead Matthew McConaughey was, right? And I think Amy Adams is right there. Like she's killing it in this show.
Definitely. And it's almost like the two-hander of like Matthew McConaughey, Woody Harrelson, and then Amy Adams and Patricia Clarkson. Like the mother-daughter and then like the partners, like they're like, it's very much
there's
like
a lot of great, there is a lot of great portrayals. The mother, the foil that mother presents, and it's I mean, it's good. I think we need to get into the actual episode so I can start talking specifics.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just going to be reading a quick synopsis, and then we're going to dive right into it. So with episode 1, Camille Preaker, a St. Louis-based reporter. Oh, yeah. Right. Sorry, I should say that because it is very cool and important to think about.
It is cool. Episode. Yeah, well, I mean, the word vanish literally pops out at the end of the episode, so yeah.
Well, I think it's at every single end of every episode they show the name of the episode, but we can get into that. I from what I understand, maybe. I think I saw at least 2 or 3, so it might be there in all 4. Okay, so episode 1, Vanish. Camille Preaker, a St. Louis-based reporter, is struggling with alcoholism and other self-destructive behavior. She has numerous flashbacks to her troubled childhood in the small town of Wind Gap, Missouri, which she explains has a population of 2,000 people divided into trash and old money. She classifies herself as trash from old money. Great line, by the way. Is that from the book? I can't remember.
That's from the book. Yep.
So good. Her editor, Frank Curry, orders her to return to Wind Gap, where a girl, 13-year-old Ann Nash, was murdered the previous summer, and another 14-year-old Natalie Keene is now missing. Camille's flashbacks intensify when she returns, and after a couple days, she goes to live with her socialite mother, Adora Krellin, and stepfather. She meets Detective Richard Willis during a search party and soon talks with him at a bar that night, before talking with Bob Nash the next day about the disappearance of his daughter. Natalie is discovered in an alley later on, but upon returning to the house, Camille notices Emma, her half-sister from Adora's second marriage, acting completely different than she was when she saw her earlier. The two talk about their middle sister, Marion, who had died when Camille was younger, but Emma soon secretly admits to disliking her mother's treatment of her and behaves like a child to hide her rebellious side. During a bath, it is revealed that Camille self-harms and has carved the word vanish into her arm.
Yeah, that's where that episode ends. So cool. I mean, we've talked about a lot of the what makes this show great, but specifically, I mean, just to begin, so we get this flashback. We don't know if it's a flashback or if it's happening, present. The only hint we get is I think we see like a Reagan or somebody poster, like 92 on a wall. That's our like one clue that this is a flashback, right?
Yeah.
But what I like about this scene is that the way it ends with young Camille coming into the house, sneaking into the room, finding adult Camille in bed, and sneaking up and like jabbing her with a pin or something. And that kind of way of like the past reaching into the present and causing pain, I think is such a perfect way to start this show, because that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I love that scene. And like the idea of the past waking up something in the future. So it's like, remember these things that you didn't remember, wake up and then remember them, basically.
Yeah, and then we see the Obama Hope poster, famous Hope poster, right? Which tells us when this is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously more modern. I did like that, and I don't know if you noticed this, and I don't know if it's intentional, but the word hope itself is obscured by like books and stuff. So you don't actually see the word hope, you just see his face.
Interesting. No, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but I just like the idea of the hope being obscured and not present, because that would fit thematically with this show.
How about Sophia Lillis returning to the podcast? She's she's Beverly from It.
Yeah, and it's so funny because at the end of our It coverage, and we were talking about It Part 2 and the movie being cast, we suggested many different people. One of the ones we said was Amy Adams. I think I might have said that one. Mm-hmm. That was like my favorite one, and it's just so funny to see that while we don't get Amy Adams as Beverly, we do get this show, which it's so cool to see that. I mean, I guess they're redheads or whatever, but I just think it's cool that that she ended up being connected, in
some way on the podcast.
In some way, right? We predicted that at least. And she's great. Sophia Lillis continues to be great. She's very compelling. Every scene she's in, I don't know. She just does a great job of feeling vulnerable but strong, and then also someone you immediately like and like want her to. Like, you worry for her. Mm-hmm. Oh man, that just reminds me too of the opening scene of them skating down the road, and how cool that. And I mean, that's a repeated image, right? The girls skating down the road, whether it's that's something people they're doing today or they're doing in the past. And I just love the kind of metaphor of them weaving in and out of the lines into oncoming traffic and the danger of it, right? Inherent in this rather otherwise kind of placid scene that seems like it's very pleasant, but I think there's an inherent danger that we get as someone kind of skating down these like back roads, right? Like you never know what's around the next bend.
Right.
So I think metaphorically it really lands. If I did a good job, I don't know if I explained that well or not.
I get that. I think also the tone and like the kind of the show is meant to feel that way, right? The show is meant to feel like ominous. Everything, like the way things are shot, the way things are lit. And like you said, like every little thing, you feel like you're going to turn a corner and see a dead body, or you're going to turn the corner and see like somebody kidnapping a child or something like that.
Or you're going to see an oncoming car, yeah.
Right. And it's not, that's like the almost like metaphor for like what can happen, right? It's like you never know, like anything could come out of anywhere.
Well, it's also like a danger of innocence, like innocence and danger, right? Because the implication is that these girls aren't thinking about what's around the next bend. They're just enjoying themselves. Whereas we know the danger inherent, right? And we don't have that same innocence. So it's the threat to their innocence. And whenever you have a serial killer killing children, I think innocence being under attack is a really strong theme for this show.
Yeah. So when Camille leaves, we immediately know that she's an alcoholic, whether we read the book or not, because she packs this insane bag of this duffel bag full of bottles of alcohol and all this stuff. And something that I think they mentioned in the book is she starts out with like little tiny bottles, those little travel bottles of whatever kind of alcohol, and then when she's in the store later, she ends up getting like a full bottle of vodka, which is like she's like graduated from like the smaller bottles into like drinking heavily from normal size bottles.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to call out a detail that I loved, and early on I didn't really know, and this might be a show specific, we don't know yet, but the phone that she uses to play the music is not her phone. Like, we see her talk on her phone later, and it doesn't have that crack on it. Mm-hmm. So this phone with the music on it we don't know why she would use a different phone, right? Maybe she just stores her music on a different phone. I don't know. But then later we find out more about what that phone could be. I don't know if it's been confirmed, but I assume it is. I mean, it belonged to that girl in the hospital, or not her. Maybe the nurse. I guess we're kind of getting ahead, but
so that scene where Camille finally goes and sees her mother, and like seeing that scene that we read on screen feels so much less welcoming. Because it's like, it felt like in the book, it was like, oh, begrudgingly come in. In this, it's actively like, I don't want you here at all in any way, and I wish that you would go away. And like the look of disgust on her face, on Adora's face, when she shows up. And then the best part was when she was like, Camille's here. And then Alan's like, who? From the other room. Yeah. And just like the idea that like she's such like they don't even think about her in the day to day, and like she's just such a small part of their life.
Well, and it's clear that it's because Adora thinks she reflects on her, right? She's so caught up in her own image and how people perceive her. And that is, you know what I mean? She can't bear to have her around because of the way it might reflect back on her. Because she's so selfish, you know, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. There's a scene at the bar, and this is like a recurring thing, and I just felt like this was fun to bring up. She goes in and she asks for a well at the bar, right? And then the bartender is like, no, I'm going to give you the top shelf stuff. And then he pours her like Maker's Mark. And then it's like continually like a huge product placement in the show. And I just wanted to know how you felt about Maker's Mark being like a prominent top shelf whiskey.
I wouldn't call Maker's Mark top shelf, but I could see it as being kind of like a mid shelf and maybe top shelf in a bar like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I would be curious if they did some sort of product placement with them where maybe they got some money kicked their way in order to show that or something.
No, I'm 100% sure, because in like episode 3 or something, she's like, she goes to another bar and she's like, Maker's Mark, please. And you're just like,
well, we also see Absolute Vodka a couple times.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how all that works, but yeah.
I just felt like it was very obvious, and I was like, wow, this show is sponsored by Maker's Mark big time.
Well, it could also be that Maker's Mark has a very Southern heritage. I don't know it exactly, but it feels like a very Southern whiskey to me. So it could be they chose it in particular because they felt like it'd be appropriate. And maybe they even said like, and they'd rather show something that they thought might elicit a response from people viewing that they're going for. I don't know. Like, I could see it either way. Either I could see it as a sponsorship, or I could see it truly just they wanted to have that particular whiskey, and so they reached out and got permission to use it.
Right. I just figured I'd bring it up because you know a lot more about alcohol, so I figured I'd get my...
Well, if you follow our Instagram, you'll see that I posted I was drinking a Dalwhinnie while I was watching it last night. And my reasoning behind that was that Dalwhinnie to me feels very classic and very almost elegant. And so I said this feels like a bottle of scotch you might find in a cupboard at Adora's house. And that was my pairing, I guess, for this week.
That's awesome. So there's some differences. It's going to be interesting going forward where we land on how the book is pushing us and how the show is pushing us, right? Like certain characters, who we think did it, who we think is involved. And I felt like already in the first episode with Alan, he's much more suspicious and much more like actively. It felt like he was just a background character, and in this he's like prominent and he's like listening to the music, like you said, trying to escape something, and like that felt very much like he's going to be more of an important character.
Well, it's interesting because I think over time I felt that way, but early on I was more like, I felt like he was a stronger character in the show, and then I felt like I liked him more. Like I empathized with him a little more in the show. Not necessarily that I did like him, but more than the book, where he was like we talked about, kind of more of just a background character. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I like kind of elevating him to prominence here, and whether or not what that means for our possible predictions, I don't know. Which, if you want to go over our different things we outlined, it's at the end of our last episode. But ultimately, we don't really know. We just had some vague theories we were kind of putting out.
Camille meets with Bob Nash. What do you think about this scene? How do you feel about him? More guilty, less guilty than the book? Do you feel like it's making you think differently?
I think they're making him out to seem more guilty in the show. Oh, that does remind me. I wanted to mention, so I listened back to our last episode, and there's a part where you quoted Bob Nash, and I think you misquoted him. Okay. And you said that he said that he would rather her be dead than raped and then killed, or rather her be killed rather than raped and then killed.
Right. It's just
But it's not. It's just he would rather her be dead than raped.
Right.
Period.
Which is way worse.
That's what he says in the book, and that's what I responded to. But when I listened to the episode, it sounds like I'm defending him saying the other thing. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to clear that up. Like, no, I'm not saying that it's better for him to say, you know what I mean? To say that he would, because of course, like, yeah, if you'd rather someone suffer less if they're going to die anyway.
Right.
So yeah, but like, I was talking about the idea that he would rather her be dead than raped, period.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I just wanted to clear that up, make sure, because it sounded like when I listened to it, I was like, ooh, it sounds a little bit like I'm defending the wrong thing here. And that's not what I meant. But yes, fucked up for sure. And I think they make him seem a little more suspicious in the show. But I don't know what that means. You know, I think he's he's kind of a red herring character in my opinion. I don't think it's going to end up being him.
I think this show and this story in general really brings up like the male perspective on certain groups of individuals. So the way that like like men will be like, oh, it's definitely a man who killed her. There's no and like specifically a gay man. Like they specifically think it's a gay man. It's just, especially in this southern town, for them for them to just target a gay man and specifically not even knowing whether someone's gay or not, say it's definitely the Keene boy, right? Because he acts a little different than everybody else, so they're just assuming that he's gay and that he has a motive to do it. So I wanted to say that women and children are all seen as these groups where the men in the show are just like, and later we'll get to the pig pulling of the teeth thing. The detective does it as well, where he's like, yeah, only a man could have done it because I did it. And it's like, it's not necessarily true. You know what I mean? Right. A woman could still do that.
It takes a lot of strength, and you'd have to be like a more powerful. Like, I don't believe that Adora could do that. I don't think she could yank the teeth out on her own. Now, whether or not if she is the killer, she could have help or something. But yeah, I think I like what you're getting at there with that perspective of underestimating women and viewing them as incapable of certain evils, whereas this show and book, and Gillian Flynn has talked about this in her writing in general, is about women as villains, right? And about, not only as main characters, but also about the evilness that they are capable of. And I'm using evil in a very general sense, not necessarily a biblical sense, right? But yeah, I'm with you. It's very interesting, and the interplay of that with what we're seeing from these women characters who seem super guilty, many of them, right? Even Jackie in the show, in my opinion, seems a lot more guilty than she did in the book.
I love Jackie in the show. Like, I think she's hilarious and great. And
so the reason I say she seems more guilty is just I felt like early on she was creepily kind of obsessed with complimenting Camille about her looks.
I think that has something to do with some stuff that went down, though. You know
Maybe.
What I mean?
Yeah. But it just, I don't know. It felt like she has like a weird obsession with how she looks.
That is true, yeah.
And I wonder if that could, you know what I mean? Because so there's also a theory that gets put forward in the next, I think it's in the next episode, maybe it's episode 3. I don't know. Should I jump around at all? It's a theory that gets put out.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so at one point, I think Vickery mentions that all the teeth were removed, which we don't even find out until episode 2, but all the teeth were removed to almost like she has a doll's mouth. That phrase gets said. And I thought, okay, that's basically a theory then, right? That someone is creating these girls, like turning these girls into dolls in some sense.
Right.
And if that's the case, then who would be doing that? We've heard about a woman in white and someone who's obsessed with looks and how pretty people are. I don't know. Jackie she could be a potential suspect. I'm telling you.
So I have a couple things I wanted to say off of that, but first I feel like I should say, let's just finish this episode out real quick. Yeah. Basically, Camille is driving around and she goes to like the town square, and then a woman screams and they all run over and they find the dead body of Natalie, which is so gruesome and well executed in the show to where it looks so gruesome and like it was rough.
And then they keep flashing to it later and stuff. Yeah. This show, I mean, we gave kind of a trigger warning at the beginning of our first episode for this whole group, but yeah, if you're someone who can be triggered by self-harm or by, gruesome murder, whatever, this show has got plenty of triggers in it that people should definitely be aware of before they attempt to watch it, I guess.
Yeah. So you mentioned the doll thing. There's another mention of doll. Somebody mentions how Natalie was placed like a doll in the middle of town, where she was placed in the windowsill. And then it got me thinking about all this doll stuff. There's the doll house. Yep, there's in the movie poster, or sorry, in the show poster, if you look at them, they all have like cracked faces, like they have like a cracked, like a doll's face, and then we have
porcelain or something,
and then we have like the idea that somebody, like you said, could be creating some sort of dolls, or they're taking the teeth as trophies, and like that got me thinking about the whole doll motif or the kind of thing that we have going on in the show, and I was like, wow, that's incredible.
Are we gonna see? Is this leading to a scene where we see somebody walking in a house and there's fucking dolls everywhere and they have human teeth shoved into their mouths?
Right. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, are we gonna get that?
I think so. Something like that.
That would be pretty creepy.
And then at the end of the episode, Camille kind of realizes that Amma is the girl that she's been seeing around town and everything.
Yeah.
And
Amma early on is not nearly as suspicious or villainous as she is in the book, but I think over time the show is like slower about revealing a little bit of that.
Well, I was like, wow, I'm really enjoying their relationship in episode 2 and all of this stuff, and then
it's like they kind of are bonding more,
right?
Like they're having more moments where you can tell that Camille is kind of like treating her like a sister and thinking of the girl from the hospital she was in and like making comparisons, and
right.
I think
and
that's still
that
ongoing,
stuff.
but in the book it felt a lot more like they were at odds with each other from the jump and were just kind of hostile. We didn't have these scenes where Amma keeps coming into her room and talking to her. I feel like maybe we had like one, but not a lot of scenes like that. Whereas we're getting a lot of that in the show.
A lot of times when something is adapted, you can kind of feel them filling for time. You can kind of feel sometimes the filmmaker is like, okay, we need to fill out 8 hours worth of TV, so we're going to pad out some episodes. But I don't feel any of that
especially in shows that are like 20 episodes or something crazy and bloated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But like even in this case, they are padding out the show, but in such interesting ways, and they're making Amma more complex and more interesting.
I don't even want to call it padding. It's they're using the time they have to add texture,
absolutely,
add characterization, add substance to the world and to the story itself. And I think to me so far they've been using their extra time very well.
Definitely. And then we get the glowing vanish at the end of the episode.
Yeah, which again, that's like the there's a whole dreamy thing and the idea of the blur between reality and whether it's a dream or whether it's a delusion or what, and that really comes home there at the end. And then it's also kind of blends over into the meta of us watching a show, right? So it's cool. It's just really well done.
So I'm going to jump into episode 2 here. Episode 2 is called Dirt. Richard wonders about the killer's modus operandi and why Anne was found in the woods on the spot where she was killed, yet Natalie was discovered propped up on a ledge in an alley posed like a doll in the middle of town. The coroner tells Richard that Natalie's teeth were yanked out with pliers. Camille sees Richard taking soil samples from Bob Nash's tires. The overprotective Adora, who has kept Marianne's room like a shrine, continues to criticize and belittle Camille, whom she accuses of embarrassing the family through her investigation. Camille thinks Natalie's older brother, high school senior John, doesn't quite fit in Wind Gap and is told by neighborhood kids that the woman in white took Natalie. Police Chief Bill Vickery implies that the boy who saw this is trash and can't be trusted. Camille says they used to scare each other with stories about the woman in white abducting children but the police chief and Richard insist that Natalie and Anne were murdered by a man. Adora accuses Camille of being drunk at Natalie's funeral, which she denies, and criticizes Natalie's mother's eulogy. Adora also says that Natalie reminded her of Camille when she was young by being a tomboy and running around in the woods, and that she tried to help Natalie. So this episode actually ends with Camille actually sending out the article where she was like deciding whether or not she should send it out with the line that says that she had gone into the room. And she decides like, even though her boss says like, no, we don't have, like morally we can't do it, and she sends it anyway. Okay,
so her kind of going against the ethical. Yeah, and kind of lying about getting permission.
Yeah, so we get a lot in this episode. The funeral is just like it is in the book, but something else is she like leaves early because her like dress is ripped by her mom.
Yeah,
which I thought was really interesting because I thought that when she ripped it, maybe she was leaving because it exposed some of her scars.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. It's interesting that she's wearing her mother's dress here too. I mean, I guess practically it makes sense because she wouldn't have brought a dress like that, but. I don't know, like there's some sort of, I feel like there's some symbolism there, right? Like the fact that she can't escape her mother, you know?
Maybe a little bit of like a doll thing, right? Like dressing up like a doll and kind of what she does to Amma.
Well, we get a lot of, the way Adora treats Amma is very doll-like, right? Like the combing of the hair and making sure she's dressed just so. And yeah, there's a lot of control there. And, you know, obviously serial killers have a lot to do with control and a need for control. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's connections to be made there that I need more information, but I'm starting to make them.
Let's talk about the pig's head.
Yeah, so I understand why they included this scene. I think it's a dramatic scene. It's striking. I do think it demonstrates that Richard is willing to go the extra mile for the case. But ultimately, it felt just a hair silly to me. It felt like, do you really need to get a pig's head and bring it back to your hotel and do this just to understand that it's going to be hard to yank a tooth out?
Why didn't he just do it like at the butcher or whatever? Like he should.
There's a lot of questions there. Yeah, I mean, like I think it's cinematic, and I think it plays pretty well, so I'm okay with it. But yeah, ultimately, realistically, you could just ask a dentist. You know what I mean? Like, there's ways to understand how difficult it is to pull out a tooth, which we get in the book. You just talk about it. We don't get this scene in the book.
Yeah. Camille goes to the wake for Natalie, and she sees some friends from high school that were like cheerleading friends with her, which we kind of learn becomes important, the cheerleading thing. And then Camille ends up going into Natalie's room at this point, right? I think everybody's left or something like that.
Yeah.
She's visiting at some point, and she goes in and finds all the spiders and everything.
No, I think it's during the wake. She like kind of just walks over into the room. Yeah. I think people are still there. They're just not in the room.
Right. So what do you think about the spiders and everything?
Yeah. So it almost seems like there's something there with the spiders, right? Like some sort of symbolism they're trying to add. It definitely adds character to this girl that we've never actually met, right? Like we feel like we kind of understand her. So at the very simplest level, it's working in that sense. She's someone who isn't afraid of spiders and in fact keeps them as pets. In a different episode, we hear about her stabbing another girl with a pencil. We know a lot about this girl without actually having met her.
And I find something else interesting is the way that everybody's talking about Natalie is different from the way that we kind of see. They're talking about her being like gentle and sweet and all of this stuff. But at the same time, she was this tomboy that like had spiders and liked to be outdoors and all of that stuff. And they're kind of, and she has like a jacket that says like whatever on it, like hanging up. And like, it's almost like this, it's either she had put on this persona kind of similar to what Amma does for her parents, or they're all trying to like retroactively be like, this is the kind of girl she was. Yeah.
I think for me, it's more the latter. I think it's people's perceptions and how people want to remember her is at odds sometimes with maybe who she really was. And yeah, it would be interesting to like see which characters are giving us a genuine account of her versus kind of misrepresenting who she was. But yeah, I mean, I think that all holds true with, when someone dies and how people choose to remember them, and they gravitate towards the memories that they like and maybe forget about things that they didn't agree with, and so on and so forth. So I think it's all very interesting.
Camille ends up meeting this kid that tells her about Natalie being taken by the woman in white, and then where she can find this other kid.
And she even has a flash of seeing a woman in white.
Right. So what did you think? Was this just like, is this a memory?
I should have gone back and paused it and seen if I could identify who the actress is.
Right.
That she is hallucinating. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Because there are times where she hallucinates her sister, Marion.
Mm-hmm.
Which I wanted to mention. I think in the first episode, she walks to, like, her mother takes her over to the room for she's going to stay for the night. And then the mother walks out. When the mother walks out, we see Marion. I think it's Marion, and I wasn't sure at first, but later I came to feel it more like it was Marion. But it was either Marion or Amma was like sitting on this bench, and her mother walks right by her without looking at her. And Camille isn't in this scene, so it's really interesting. It's like you could almost argue that the implication is that this is a ghost.
Right.
Right?
But it's like, who are we as the viewer? Like, what perspective is the filmmaker trying to give us?
And that's why all these lines are blurred, right? And what is a ghost if not being haunted by the memory of your past, or being haunted by the memory that is inherent in a place? So, yeah, I think I love the idea that it's going to blur those lines and maybe leave it up to because like if you're someone who strongly believes in ghosts, then maybe you see this and go, oh yeah, this is the ghost of Marion. And I don't think this show would tell you that you're wrong. It's just going to be up to how you want to interpret these hallucinations.
Yeah. She goes to the house of this little boy that the other little boy told her about. And this kid's like he's like hanging out in the window, and he's got a gun. And then we meet the mother who has cancer, I believe. And just like,
oh man, I love the way she kind of just like appears into the screen, like because she's like slowly coming towards, and she's dragging that thing, and then later Vickery mentions that's who he thinks the woman in white is to the boy, and you can totally see it. Like I buy that would be that's a plausible explanation. Yeah, that's a really interesting really interesting scene.
I felt like this is another situation, like Vickery is basically saying, like, you can't trust this kid. His mom's a meth head. And he was born into that, and he's like, you can't trust him. He's always lying about stuff. And it's just like discounting other people. Like supposedly this is an eyewitness, so you have to treat it that way. I feel like,
right.
Or else you're going to be like Vickery, where Vickery is convinced that it's some trucker from out of town, and he refuses to believe that anybody in town could be capable of it. And it's not until I think like the end of this episode that we start to really see him even challenge that idea.
Yeah. Vickery is feels a little bit different in the show. He feels a little bit more stubborn, a little bit less like he really just wants to get to the bottom of this, and more like he is like you said, like invested in the idea that it's not someone from the town. So
the last thing in this episode that I wanted to talk about was Amma. At the very end, she's like kind of getting her hair brushed by Adora. And then Camille like goes upstairs, and then I think hears screaming or something and runs downstairs. And then Amma's having like this seizure or something, or like freaking out.
Yeah, I don't think she was having a seizure. I think this is the scene from the book where she's freaking out about something being wrong. But it wasn't as clear in the show what the fit was over.
Well, in the show, she kind of said like it was like her friends are like, or the people that she knew are dead or whatever. Like she's upset.
Yeah, it almost just seemed like an outburst of like, I'm so upset, I'm just gonna like scream and fall into your arms, kind of thing.
I felt like they were like holding her down. Like it looked like they were like holding her down and stuff, and like she was like thrashing about, which I was like, they must. I thought they were like drugging her or something.
Yeah, and I seem to remember her saying something about her dollhouse, so like something not being right, which is what it was in the book.
Yeah.
So it felt like it was supposed to be the same fit, but this is one time where I'll be a little bit critical, and just that I didn't think it was clear why she was having the fit, when I think it could have been more clear.
It was something that I was like, wow, this really stood out as like a moment where I felt like they were like trying to hold it, because it was like she was so calm, and then next scene she's like completely losing it.
Yeah. Well, and so that does add just I feel a lot of empathy for Amma in the show that I didn't feel in the book. And that's because I think just seeing what her home life has to be like day in and day out with Adora there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also you just think about how Camille grew up with the same thing, but like, yeah, the idea that she has to be a completely different version of herself when she's at home. And then she just like, everything is taken to 11 when she leaves the house, and it's all acting out and trying to rebel, and how much that must have like screwed with her head growing up, and all of these characters' heads, right? And then also Adora, like I feel kind of bad for her because losing the daughter, and how she does genuinely seem to care about things, and maybe too much. Whereas, I don't know, I guess in the book I felt more like it was all just pure selfishness, but show version of Adora, I think, does seem to care. Or at least she's doing a better job of convincing me that she does. I don't know.
Yeah. I think so too. Like she is, because I feel like you feel the impact more of Miriam being gone, because she's like in her bed and the shrine that she has to her, and you can see like what you can connect the dots of, like she lost Miriam, and like whether or not there was something she was involved in that, because we have like some theories about that.
Yeah, the show has not made me feel that way as much as the book did. So that theory of mine might be completely wrong, but who knows?
Yeah, it's just like you can connect the dots to see where she would treat Amma like she does because of the fact that she lost Miriam. The only other thing in this, one more thing. Camille buys a sewing needle kit in this episode, and she's struggling with cutting herself throughout the episode. And like at one point almost puts the needle underneath her fingernail. Do you think that? I don't think she actually does or not. I don't know.
I think she kind of shoved it in there. I don't know. Yeah, that was it made me squirm a little bit.
Yeah, and then she was like cutting words into her pants instead of into her skin, which I feel like is important. Yeah. It's just she's progressing further and further towards like we talked about in the book episode, potentially returning to like relapsing into cutting herself.
Yeah, it's I guess I'll talk about it here, but I think it comes up more in the next episode, or at least that's when I really caught on to it. The show has a brilliant way of setting up memory. Like she'll remember something troubling, and then she'll kind of cut herself off from fully remembering it, and she'll fixate on something that she could use to cut herself, or she'll fixate on the toilet from the hospital where she got the screw and cut herself so badly, right? And then it'll cut to her reaching for the bottle the bottle that has the vodka in it and taking a long swig. And this pattern repeats itself several times.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really shows how this is all caught up in, like, this memory causes pain. That pain makes her feel like she should cut. And then instead of cutting, her next coping mechanism that she has changed to is is drink, right? Is the bottle. So it all shows how this is all caught up in her pain and her memory from this place. So I just think it's really well done. And the way that's all put together on screen and not told to us, just shown repeatedly to where we can pick up on it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. It's incredible. And you notice those times, and as it goes on, they become more important, right? So like I can remember early on there was a shot of like a toilet, and I didn't understand why there was a shot of a toilet. And it was just like I was saying before earlier in the episode, where there's like these shots that like are of mundane items, and then they eventually come back around. And how could we have possibly known that the back of the toilet seat was going to be used for what it is in this episode?
Well, and we know a little bit because we've read, but like people who haven't and are just coming into the show cold, there's a lot of details you'll miss. Like I think it might have been episode 1 or maybe 2. My wife pointed out that when she comes down to breakfast, she picks up a knife and starts to cut an apple, and then Adora comes over quickly and takes the knife away from her and has the help, I forget that character's name, has her cut it instead. And the implication being that she doesn't trust her to be holding a knife, right? But it happens kind of in like beside the point of the scene itself is kind of going on, and they're talking about something else. So I think you're very forgiven if you don't even notice it really happen. Other than her getting it take away, and then like Camille has kind of this look of exasperation, like, you can trust me with a knife. But then we also see all the time her gaze lingering on sharp objects, right? Like she'll look at a knife, she'll look at a pen, she'll look at a whatever, a screw, and you can see her kind of lingering and staring at it. And I think that is reminiscent of the book, where she talks about these objects kind of calling to her. And it's just cool to see that transcribed into the visual medium and done so well.
Completely agree. So we're going to move into episode 3 now.
Yeah, let's do it.
Episode 3 is called Fix. A party results in Vickery catching a drunk Amma, who soon crashes a golf court into her mother's rose bushes, resulting in her bonding with Camille. Camille flashes back to her recent stay in a psychiatric facility where she shared a room with Alice. They become close friends, listening to Alice's music, but Alice commits suicide in their room by drinking drain cleaner, and a devastated Camille repeatedly slashes her own wrists. In the present, Camille interviews Bob Nash, who thinks John Keane was involved. Vickers calls Adora, who arrives and rebukes Camille while comforting Bob. Later, John Keane accuses Bob Nash of being involved. John's girlfriend, Ashley Wheeler, is one of the few people friendly to Camille. After a conversation between Adora and Vickery, Adora warns Amma about Camille and that she is dangerous. Richard is frustrated by lack of cooperation from the public in Windgap, and Vickery belittling his belief that the murderer is from Windgap and knew the two girls. He tells Camille to stay out of his way. It is revealed that Adora also knew Anne because she tutored her, and that Anne was incredibly fond of her.
This is the episode that ends with Camille racing down the highway, right?
Yes.
In the car?
Yes.
Okay. This is my favorite episode of the series so far.
Me too, yeah.
This episode, really? Is it really?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. This episode is incredible.
It was just basically, for me, it was the flashback that it started to tie threads, right? It was started to realize why we kept getting random shots of Drano throughout throughout the show. Like, not even in episode 3. Like, there was an episode of Drano in like 1 or 2 at some point.
Yeah, well, and she's hallucinated Alice before this like she's been one of the hallucinations, like standing in the train, or I think one point she's like wearing the dress that's actually just hanging on the door, which is such a cool like real thing where like you ever like there's like a piece of clothing in a place you're not expecting it and you think a person's standing there. Like I love the way it evokes that like very this thing that everybody I suppose has probably felt. Okay, yeah, that's so cool. And then so this episode, the flashback, is so brilliant, and I wonder if we're gonna get this in the book because we haven't gotten it yet.
That's what I was wondering too. Is like, because if this was a show only thing, I feel like this was like this makes the show better than the book so far. Yeah,
we'll see. Well, maybe that's something we'll get in a future chapter. But the relationship between her and Alice is so powerful, and it's clear that to Camille, she was starting to view Alice as almost a surrogate sister, right? The sister that she lost. And she clearly clearly these are all tied up with each other. It's Marion, it's Alice, and then now Amma. Like, all of these girls all sort of represent the same thing for her. Yeah, she was bonding with this girl. She saw a lot of herself in her, and the fact that the girl killed herself, I think is like, it's the trauma of that moment and how damaging it was to her and how she had just started to hope again. And yeah, it was powerful stuff.
Yeah, and the music, this is when everything ties in with the music, which I felt like was such a strong staple of Camille's character up to this point. And then we find out that it basically is Alice's influence on her, that because, like I said before, music is an escape. Music is a way to cope with things going on. And it's, a safer way than alcohol or cutting.
And this is her way of holding on to Alice, right? Listening to her music. But I was just thinking about how, from a storytelling point of view, how cool and effective it is to have a detail like that has been around for so long now in the show. We're in the 3rd episode, right? And then all of a sudden, the reveal takes something that we thought was one thing and like adds this layer to it, or adds this reveal to something that we've grown accustomed to already, and just how well that lands, and how, just like I was thinking of like a storytelling perspective, how a storyteller could use that in different ways, and how it's just cool. It's just something to think about, and how you can have something that is there in plain sight, but maybe people don't know how important it is until a certain point where the reveal comes out.
I feel like Vickery is somehow kind of implicating himself, right? I feel like he is involved because of how we see him interact with Adora later in the episode. We see him, like, basically he's told Adora that Camille is over at the Nash house. And then Adora goes and shows up because of that. And then they meet later, and they have this weird relationship where, like, the husband leaves the room and he seems like a little jealous or something. And then they talk and kind of have like a almost flirtatious.
Wasn't that? Are you sure that's not in episode 4? I think 3 ends with the confrontation where Amma comes and her friends, and they meet Camille and Richard, who are bonding and talking, and it becomes clear that Camille has lied about not wanting to go out, right? And Amma comes up and is angry with her, but then also like doing the whole mean girl routine, right, with her friends.
I feel like we actually start to see her. I think that's like what has been sleeping underneath all along. Like, she's almost manipulating Camille into like being nice to her, and then this is kind of also how she actually feels. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to mention how, female sexuality is like very important to this show. And I think Amma, it was really fascinating how, in my opinion, she's using her sexuality to like menace them. It's like she's bullying them with her own sexuality. It's so weird, like especially Richard. And it's like she knows that she is a minor, right, and that she shouldn't be attractive to an adult, but she's like using that against him, and the way she dresses, right, and like everything like that. It's in her hands. She's wielding it like a weapon.
Yeah.
And God, it makes her reprehensible, right? But it also gives her this unique power because she's willing to do it, and she's willing to use it in that way. But it's also, you could argue, like in this place, maybe that's the one weapon she has. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I hadn't seen that, especially from a young character. And that's what made that scene so incredible to me. Like she was like genuinely like frightening almost in like a weird, uncomfortable way.
Yeah, and I mean,
because she's making these sexual jokes and everything, right? Like
right. It's very uncomfortable, and I think, like you said, she is weaponizing that, and I think it's also it kind of comes back around because we know that Camille has like this. I don't know if I want to say violent, but like almost like a violent sexuality because of like the things that shaped her early on.
Yeah, it's caught up in violence. At least we see that, right?
And we find out like the place that the butcher place with the nude pictures on the walls and everything is like
shack.
The shack is like a
shack.
We've come to find out that that's a place that like Amma ends up hanging out.
Yeah. Next episode.
So I think that like maybe there's some of that like darkness tied up in her sexuality as well because of that kind of thing. I don't know.
It's crazy that she goes back and like it's almost identical to how she. This is the next episode. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but Camille, when she goes back to that hunting shack and it looks identical to how she like saw it when she was a kid.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's really interesting to me. I mean, I guess I just believe it, but I mean, it's not air conditioned. It's out there in the elements. It's just like magazine cutouts on the wall. You'd think they would have like molded by now. It's like 20 years later or whatever it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So what do you think about the way that like Ashley, who is the girlfriend of John Keane, the way that she like controls the situation and like tries to speak for him a lot of the time? And I also wanted to mention that I really like how Camille is like bonding with a lot of like the broken people in town, quote unquote broken. Yeah. She sees these people who hate the town and she like is more drawn to them, and you can tell that they're bonding. And Ashley was also willing to lie about like the alibi for the article. So that's another thing.
Yeah, she like tries to, and then is that John? Is that character's name?
Yes, John
Keane. Yeah, John Keane just like he's like, no, don't do that. But yeah, God, the fact that she's wearing her cheerleader outfit when she opens the door, and Camille says like, "Oh, I thought the season was over" or something like that, and she goes, "Yeah, sometimes I just get to feeling spirited," and I don't know. There's something really interesting there. Like she desperately is trying to hold on to John. Like maybe she doesn't want him to leave, or she doesn't want him to. It almost is like she suspects him too, but she doesn't care, and she just doesn't want it to be true. And then we see that kind of come to the head in the next episode too. Yeah, I don't know. Really, really interesting. I don't know where that character's going. At first, she just seemed really fake to me, but then I started to feel kind of sad for her because it felt like she's just desperately trying to hold on to John.
Yeah, and it also feels like she's like drank the Kool-Aid of the city, right? Like she's like very much like it's about like the image, and my boyfriend's not going to be seen as a child murderer or whatever she says. So moving into episode 4, Ripe. Camille agrees to show Richard some of Wingap's crime scenes, though the tour opens up old wounds. Alan confronts Adora about her sharing confidences with Chief Vickery.
I mean, that's a very simple summary of it, but that is what happens. I mean, yeah, this is a scene that I was worried we were just going to skip over from the book, but it's just kind of, like I said, there's been some rearranging. We get it here. This is a really interesting episode. This is probably my second favorite. I don't know if I had to judge. This definitely ends on a cliffhanger, which we have to talk about. It progresses the story a little bit farther than what we got in the book, which I thought was kind of cool because it was like we had caught up to where we were in the book, and then we get a little bit more.
So yeah, I mean, let's just talk about that because you're there right now. Basically, nearing the end, she realizes that Natalie, Alma, and Anne had all been friends, and they would all hang out, and they would hang out in that shack.
John tells her in the bar.
Camille puts that together and realizes that she potentially is the next target because they were both targeted, and they all hung out at this shack, and they were potentially waiting until only one of them showed up. So she kind of freaks out and goes to try to find Alma and goes to the house. She's not there. The editing here is it's super misleading.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a lot of like cutting of like her dead body and like her skating and all, and like that scene, that last part absolutely is probably one of the best scenes in the show so far, because and it leaves us on this crazy cliffhanger.
It's confusing, but also leaves you you have to know what's real and what's not, because I don't even know for sure that she found her dead body.
No, I don't think she did.
And because it seems like it could just be her worrying that that's what's going to happen.
Right.
But with the way this show is and the way it's established these blurry lines, it also could be true, right? Like if next episode Alma has been killed and we're like it's her standing over the body, like I feel like they've done enough to make me believe that is what happened. But I also my the way I'm leaning is more that was just her being worried that that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's found Alma yet.
I don't think that. Yeah, I think Alma might be in danger, and I think she's put those things together. But I think the sequence was meant to, one, leave us on a cliffhanger, but two, show us that like Camille's starting to put things together. Like she's starting to realize that like Alma is going to be in danger. I have no doubt about that.
And I think even though
I can't believe we had to stop on this episode.
Yeah, even though she, as much as animosity is growing between her and Alma, this ties back to the Alice and the Marion thing, right? Where ultimately she does still care about her, and she does still worry that she's been killed, right? And I don't know, it's really cool how conflicted she can feel about her, and yet you can see that she's so worried that she's lost another, someone who's close to her.
Yeah.
Because it really, you can see it on her face, right? Like she's so worried about it. But I have to mention too. So we're hit with 2 cliffhangers, right? But bam. The other one is Alan. We see him like psyching himself up. Which, by the way, I was like getting ready to give him props because I was so happy that we were finally seeing him stick up for himself against Adora, and speak up and not just be constantly told what to do and be so frustrating, right? Like spineless. We see a little bit of that out of him, which I thought was cool. I was like, oh, go, Alan. But then, we see him kind of getting drunk and getting worked up. And then there's a gun sitting out on a table. And now I don't know that we ever see him holding the gun. But then when he's looming in the door frame, right, and he's coming to Adora's bedroom, and then he comes closer to her in the bed, right? Like we don't know. It's like, does he have the gun? Is he there to kill her or kill himself or who knows what?
Yeah. And it's all tied up in that thing that I was talking about before, where it's like Adora and Vickery were meeting and there's something going on, and she doesn't even see Alan as like a person, really. She just sees him as like this annoyance or something. Yeah,
man. And that really brings, I mean, I in the book episodes I talked about how Alan seemed like he could be a suspect for something. I didn't see this coming, but it also, like, it could be nothing. Like, that could just be a decorative, like a gun that's just, like, not decorative, but, I don't know, maybe he just had it out. Why would he have it out, though? I guess that's an open question, right?
Yeah. I got, like, a rape vibe, though, too. Like, he was coming into, like... Yes. Yeah, like, he was, like, looming over her and, like, coming down onto the bed with her.
Well, we've gotten the implication. I think there's a couple times now where he's asked her, like, is there anything else you need? And to me, there's like a subtle but strong implication that he's asking her if he can be physical with her, right, and have sex with her or whatever, some sort of intimacy. And she is clearly very withholding of that and very like, oh, I don't know why you would, I don't know why. Clearly, they sleep in separate rooms, right? And she doesn't need him around, and I think it's frustrating for him. And then he sees her talking with Vickery and gets jealous. Whether or not for good reason, I don't know. Probably not. But it seems like he thinks she's being more intimate with Vickery than she is with him.
Yeah.
And so this is a manifestation of that. It kind of comes to a head, and where it leads, I don't know. Yeah. It's going to be really interesting to see.
So moving to a different scene that happened much earlier.
Yeah.
What do you think is going on with this blood underneath John Keene's bed that the girlfriend cleans up?
I wasn't sure what it was. Is it just blood, or was there something else to it?
I'm not sure. Yeah. I thought it was blood, but I don't know. It could be something else too.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely ominous, and it makes us have suspicions about him. And it's interesting the fact that she cleans it up, and then like she's so willing to hide stuff for him, right?
Yeah. I mean, she was surprised too, so I don't think that was her doing. So she was surprised and cleaned it immediately. Yeah. So there's something going on there.
We also get this budding relationship between Richard and Camille, right? And the the revelation of some of these scenes. We get some of these like crazy things that have happened in her past that she reveals to him, and then going to the shed and the way that continues to be this nexus of like her, I don't know, damaged sexuality and how it's caught up in this shed, right? And then it comes to a head in her bizarre interaction with Richard, where she, no, we can't kiss, but shove your hand in my pants, which
and then they kiss later.
And then they kiss later, right? Like, and she says, you like me because I'm unconventional, and
well, I think it has something to do with like that, the like we talked about before, like the violence or like the attachment to all the other things that go along with her sexuality, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly caught up in that shed, which like I'm like scared and fascinated to find out, because we don't know what happened in that shed. Not really, right? Other than we've just seen her look at it, but I feel like there's a strong implication that something happened there.
Yeah, I mean, we've also seen Camille in her cheerleading uniform, and like when she actually, we haven't seen like the full scene or anything, but we saw like her, poking at a spider or whatever, like getting it to like run away, when she was seemingly, from what I can infer, potentially about to get raped or something.
Yeah, and it's weird because when she defends it to Richard, once again, just happens in the book too, she talks about it being consensual.
Yeah.
But the flashback, that didn't look like a girl to me who was getting ready to have sex. That looked like someone who was just out in the woods. I don't know, though. Like, we haven't got the full scene, so it's hard to know. But yeah, so I got very rapey vibes from it too, for sure.
Yeah, and he talks about, Richard says something about how it's not consensual because she's not old enough to make that decision and all of those things, which is true. Because
yeah, but I mean, like, and how old are the guys? I mean, I'm not trying to defend it, but like, it's not like the guys are adults. They are also in high school, right?
But it's just like multiple people, right?
Oh, supposedly. Yeah. No, yeah. And the implication was that she's drunk, obviously, and they're taking advantage of her. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, strong implication that it's rape. And we talked about this in our last episode, that it feels very much like her trying to come to grips with something that happened to her. And like, kind of like, if she can convince herself that it was consensual, that it makes it easier for her to live with it, I guess. Like, right? Like, it's easier to think that you weren't a victim. It can be. And maybe that gives you a semblance of control over it. We get a scene that's not in the book, and which, by the way, we haven't even talked about, Curry on the phone, and he seems to be getting a chemo treatment. And man, I already like Curry a lot.
I wasn't sure if it was chemo or like dialysis or something.
Oh yeah, I thought it was chemo, but maybe that's just my own histories. I don't know, but yeah, I just really like Curry in this show. Like, I like him in the book too, but
he's like a father figure for her, where she didn't have one.
And you can tell he genuinely cares about her too, and he genuinely thinks that it's good to make her, like, whereas in the book I felt like it was a little bit irresponsible, right? How much he was pushing her to go back to Wingap. But in the show, I think he truly believes that she has to go and face these demons to get past them. And I love, like, I mean, in another thematic thing that gets said in the show, Camille says, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger or whatever. And then she's like, if it doesn't kill you, and is the implication. And that's what this show's all about, right? Like maybe the memories, maybe they shouldn't be faced because they're dangerous. I don't know. God, this show, like, I love that. It's like a subtle play on like how many other shows have dealt with memory. But this show, like, the memory and the history in this place just feels so much more dangerous and so much more powerful than it has in a lot of other stuff I've seen. I'm just taken with it. I'm really enjoying it.
Me too. I can't wait to see more. I guess the last little bit that I want to talk about is kind of just like where we land on some of these characters. Because I do think that like it'll be interesting going forward how the show ends up and how the book ends up, if they end up similar, and how some of these things are changing our perceptions of characters. So like Amma, for instance, how did you feel about Amma in the show, even knowing we got some of her darker side in the later episodes?
It's been a journey with me. It's starting with me being more empathetic towards like, especially, you know, when her shoving the stuff in Camille's hair, starting to come around and be like, oh yeah, she is terrible. She's just this awful person. The thing with the pigs is, again, weird. And seems like very psychopathic to me, but I keep coming back to feeling sorry for her because of her home life, and ultimately, and then also like the budding weird relationship she has with Camille, and then the danger she's all of a sudden put in. I don't know, like I feel like almost like I'm being manipulated by the show, and I don't know where. You know what I mean? Like, it's.
I think so too. Yeah. I feel like the show wants me to feel this way, but I feel like she is weird and she has some stuff going on, but I don't think she has any involvement in what has happened. And I think that she's actually like to be somebody who's supposed to be seen to be protected, even though we see that she has some of those demons. But I could easily see the show taking a turn and being like, no, she was definitely involved.
Well, and it could be a misdirection, right? Like if we're worried about her being a victim, then we're not thinking about her being behind it, being responsible. Right. And so there's also another character, just speaking of potential other suspects, the teacher that we see Amma flirt with in this episode, who I don't believe we've gotten in the book at all. And he's kind of creepy, and like it seems like they might have a history, which would make him a pedophile.
But he also like she grabs his hand and he like brushes it
no,
off. No,
but she also pointedly says something about like, is that why you're so sad because you can't erase history? And like very pointedly, I don't know. To me, I got the implication that she was saying like we have a history, and you can't deny it. And maybe he's trying to. Now maybe I'm misreading that scene, but yeah, that guy seems like he's got something weird with him. He could end up being a red herring as well. He's introduced awfully late for it to end up being him, but it could be. I don't know. I wonder if people who are like watch a lot of mysteries and read a lot of mysteries, if they could, what they would say about when the killer needs to be present for it to feel
impactful.
Yeah, or for it to feel like the author's playing fair. Because at a certain point, it doesn't feel like the author's playing fair. If the whole point is it's a whodunit and you haven't given us the person anywhere in the story until right before it's revealed, then it might feel like you've been cheated. But I'm also just not 100% sure if that's what kind of story this is. Like, I don't know. I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah. So other characters, how about Alan? We kind of talked about him for the most part. But...
Alan, I think, is up to something. I think we're repeatedly showed that he's powerless, that he's frustrated, that he is being controlled by Adora. So as he's a man and he could rip out teeth, and we're seeing him potentially lashing out at the end of this episode. He's suspicious. I don't think it's him ultimately, but he definitely is a suspicious dude in my opinion. I don't know. I don't know.
I agree.
It's weird too. He's been a journey too, because I think I liked him more at the jump, because he felt like he was trying to be diplomatic a lot of the time instead of just being silent.
Me too. And then he was also like, you saw in like the flashbacks, he was there with the birthday cake.
Yeah.
And like he cared when the mother didn't. And so that leads me to, I agree. I think that he definitely has something. There's something going on. And then just Adora. What do you think about Adora?
Yeah, Adora, I mean, she's a real piece of work in the show as well. I think I do feel a little more empathy for her. I think they do a good job of showing how much her daughter's death affected her. Jackie saying that she used to be this free spirit, I think it was in episode 2, as free as a kite or something like that. And Camille can't even believe it. But it seems to be true, because she says like, no, it's for real. And the idea that maybe her daughter's death changed her so much, right, and has created her. And it's one of those things we talked about. I read the Philip Larkin poem in the last episode, but just the idea of like, pain begetting more pain, and drama and trauma, creating more, and how damaged people can damage other people in turn, right? And we're seeing that on display in this show.
Are there any other characters you wanted to highlight?
I mean, Vickery, I think that there's something kind of suspicious going on with him. It seems like maybe him and Adora have this kind of agreement to cover things up, or to like keep things under wraps.
Yeah.
And so he seems maybe a little bit corrupt, but I don't think he's the, tooth killer.
Yeah, me either. But I will say that he earned a little check mark in the positive column for me when he was saying that like the festival thing that Adora wants to do, he doesn't want that to happen, so he's like standing up to her and saying like, I don't want this to happen. So
he's not it's like not, he's not in her pocket, you know what I mean? But yeah, they have like something odd with their relationship. But yeah, no, I love it, because he's at times frustrating with his insistent that it was like a Mexican day laborer, despite any evidence. And so you get frustrated with him, but then you also see him getting his hands dirty and like, getting out there, and it seems like he really cares about this case, right? Like he's not just ignoring it. His home life helps a little bit with that too, right? We see him at home with his wife, and I don't know, like it's clearly a routine he has, and how he's out there every day working in this town. I don't know, like I like him as much as I am suspicious of him at the same time.
So I guess the last couple people are just John Keane and Bob Nash. Where do you land on them?
I don't think Bob Nash did it, and I think we're going to get confirmation that he didn't coming up here. What form that'll take, I don't know. John is interesting, and I'm starting to wonder if this isn't actually a serial killer as much as maybe someone trying to cover it up and make it seem like it was a serial killer, right? Like that could be that.
I feel like if nothing, the show has made me realize that it's definitely not just one person going around serial killing. Like it might be a serial. Yeah. I think it could be somebody who is a serial killer who's being assisted by others, but I don't think it's a one person going around killing people.
Yeah, well, when we talked about the two different MOs, right? And so it almost could be like one person killed somebody, and then somebody else in response killed them in a similar way. and
to try to make it look,
to try and make it look like it was the same person, but it wasn't. And I don't know. And is John potentially one of them? Like, did he kill one of the girls? Not his sister, but the other one. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I also wonder because I have a strong feeling that we're going to see somebody else, another kid, die.
You think so?
I think so. And then I think that will either lead us into like a full serial killer or I just have a feeling that another kid is going to die.
God, this show is so dark.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a good thing that I love this kind of stuff, because otherwise it would just depress me. But I love dark fiction. I love dark stories and horror and grim dark fantasy and this kind of stuff. I murder mysteries, especially really dark ones from like Britain and stuff. I like some of my favorite shows on like Netflix. I've always been drawn to it, and it's really interesting to me. So
are you talking about like Luther?
Yeah, Luther,
Broadchurch.
God, there's more. I just can't think of the top of my head.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of those kind of like, because like British people love their procedurals, right? But they do them so well too. So yeah, The Killing is an American one that I enjoyed. I have quibbles with all these shows, but in certain ways, but overall, like I just like those kind of shows. And whenever I see one pop up, it's like a new one, and I'm like, ooh, I want to give it a try. And this show is like it's like one of those, but like even better. Like this is like at its highest form, this kind of show, in my opinion, so far. We got to see if it sticks to the landing, but nothing has led me to believe it won't.
Well, I know. We don't know how I don't know how the book ends.
Right.
You don't know how the book ends.
Right.
We don't know how the show ends, but we know that people love it. So I'm assuming that it holds up. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
So last episode we came up with some theories based on just our book reading. Now that we've seen the show as well, let's update those theories and see if anything's changed and see where we're at with the killer, mystery murder here. Yeah,
that sounds good, man. I put forth a theory about Adora that I think has maybe changed a little bit, so we'll save that for the very end. Before we get there, I want to thank a patron who's been helping us out, Andrew M. He's given us his money to help this show go, and we just want to thank all our patrons that they're really making this thing possible and helping us keep going. We're going to be recording our next bonus episode later this month, and we're releasing that to patrons only. So if you want to learn more about that, go to patreon.com/ink2film, and you can see what kind of stuff we're offering.
Also, if you wanted to connect with us on social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those at ink2film.
Yeah, and we hope you reach out. And another way you can reach out, send us an email, ink2film@gmail.com. We'd just love to hear your take on this show, this book, and your experience with it. We just ask you don't spoil us, but other than that, we just love to hear from you.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music. Okay, so Adora and Miriam, update me. What do you think now that we've seen the show?
Yeah, so last episode I put forth the theory that Adora, through some sort of, I don't know what the syndrome's called. I don't know if it's Munchausen's by proxy or whatever it is. But it's if she was somehow poisoning Marion in order to get attention, right? And we, what else? And one of the reasons why I think this changed is we didn't get the baby biting scene from the book. Yeah. And so I feel like we haven't got as much of an implication that maybe Adora is actually like kind of a psycho. So because of that, I feel like that theory is on less steady ground. Like, it could still be true, but it's making me doubt whether or not that's the way we're going to go. I don't know. You also had a theory about Adora, though, possibly being tied up in the murders themselves. So where are you at with that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Adora is definitely still involved in some way. And I feel like the slaughterhouse has something to do with it. And her scheming with Vickery is like an added thing now. But I also think that there's something weird going on with Alan. And maybe like Alan is doing something, and then because she loves him, but she's disgusted by him, she can't be near him and doesn't want to be around him and stuff, but she's willing to cover it up.
Yeah.
But I also think that your theory still has some weight to it, because we get these like lingering shots of like whatever you call the thing that holds the bags of fluid in hospitals.
IVs.
We get like lingering shots of that by like the bed and stuff. And I think that idea of Adora needing somebody to need her is like if she was like making her sick, then she would need Adora, and Adora would be able to just always be around her and treat her like a doll again.
Well, and all of my empathy for that character evaporates if that's true, right? Because it's all just it's been manufactured to make people feel sorry for her.
Right.
When she's actually the one causing all these problems. And that could, I mean, there is a certain poetic justice to that, right? Or not justice, but just like it kind of fits this story. And so I guess I could still see it being a thing. The show has just done a good job to kind of make me look the other way. So maybe that'll just make the reveal that much stronger. I don't know.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading most of the rest of this and watching it.
Yeah, man. So we got 3 more episodes coming out. We outlined it at the beginning. We hope you'll join us for all of them. Even if you're not a book reader, we hope you'll check out the book episodes. And maybe you wait a little bit until you've seen some more of the show. Who knows? But we just hope you check it out. All our content on this one because it all kind of plays together, and I think it gives a cohesive chronicle of our journey with this book, which I don't know. Hopefully, is interesting.
Yeah. All I know is that that finale episode in 3 weeks it's gonna be bonkers.
It's gonna be cool
because we're gonna get the finale of the book and the show.
Yeah, which we've never done like that before, so it'll be really interesting to see how that.
It'll be a big finale.
Goes. All right. Well, until then, I'm Luke,
and I'm James.
All right. See you later.